today we're going to be talking about optimizing your project success through standardizing your project-based services and working specifically with things like templates. We've got myself. I'm Kate Schlak, the VP of Growth Marketing. If you've been on these before, I'm just here to host. Today's going to be a little bit different, and we'll go through the full run through in a minute, but it'll be a little bit different because we are going to jump more into showing templates in the software. So just kind of keep that in mind. And our contact information, we won't put it up again at the end. So if you need it, grab it now. You can email us, or you can always find us on Discord. We're in the Halo PSA Discord, MSP Geek Discord, Tech Pulse, MSPRS. So you can find both of us on there. Joining me today is Louis Bagdonas. He's our Senior Program Manager of MSP at Moovila, which means he is spending hours and hours every week helping MSPs just like yourself on board to our product. So he's seen everything from very small MSPs that are just starting out with project management to very complex, multi-department, international MSPs that are really trying to just get more efficient and more profitable in their projects. So Louis has a wide breadth of knowledge on project management, and he worked on a lot of projects in different industries prior to coming to Moovila. So he's here today to teach you all about our subject. Take it away, Louis.
And I'll go ahead and skip past this one here. You already gave us an introduction of Moovila, what we are, who we are, what we do. And, you know, this is MSP focused here today, but we will reference a little bit just industry standard project management, right? And what we'll start with today is going to be kind of talking about that base template, that default template that you have on all your projects. What are some basics that we should try to make sure we have in all of our templates? From there, we'll talk about starting to think about a historical project review, right? So starting to identify what are those projects that you've done over and over and over and over again that you can then start to offer as those product-based offerings. And then, as Kate mentioned, I'll try to keep content a little bit shorter today and then jump right into the Moovila platform to show you what exactly we're talking about and then how we can leverage some of these processes and best practices to then start to use automation to help manage our projects and handle, you know, some of that digital labor for us. So starting with base template and template basics. So I don't know how many folks tuned into our webinar last month. We were lucky enough to have Rob Hurd from Pax8, who's a coach. And we go to Rob and a number of other coaches a lot to say, hey, we're thinking about updating our software to help MSPs do things this way. Is this best practice? Is this what you would recommend and what you would coach? And one of the questions that I'd asked Rob was, what percentage of your projects, because we're talking about KPIs and we were looking at the overall portfolio and saying, hey, what KPIs should we track across the portfolio? And one was, what percentage of your projects were created using templates? And Rob's answer there was 100%. And I asked a little bit then, well, what about those custom projects you've never done before, right? It's a new application deployment that you're doing for a customer that's maybe getting into a new industry. You know, how do you start that project from a template, right? And Rob's answer was exactly what we've been seeing and what we've been talking about is you should still have your base repeatable administrative tasks in a template that you use on all your projects. So when we get into the training and onboarding for Moovila, we always talk through early on building a project, right? And we reference building an outline for a paper or a book. You know, if you think all the way back to all of our educations, wherever you're from and however you were taught, when we learn about writing and outlines, it's always you've got an opening, you've got a middle, and you've got an end, right? And clearly defining that. And not just in the MSP industry, but in all projects, we have that same opening, we have that middle phase that's going to be our execution, implementation, deployment, whatever we want to call it. And then we've got our end, right? We've got to wrap that project up. We've got to tie our loose ends. We've got to confirm our customers happy. We've got to review that project. So really starting to think about what are those repetitive project management tasks that you're doing on all projects. So we see a number of people that might just have one project management task on all their projects, and that's where those PMs dump all that time. That's where they dump all their notes, all their meetings, everything there. So really maybe starting to think about how do we break that out, right? At the beginning of every project, do we do an internal kickoff? Do we do a client kickoff? Does everybody agree to that work plan, sign off and say, this is the timeline we're going to work against? Hopefully we've already got that budget in place from the pre-sales team, but maybe we say, yep, just to confirm, here's the budget, especially if it's a T&M project as well too, time and material. And then within that base template, where are our milestones? So to that point, everybody signs off and agrees on that work plan for this project. That's a milestone. You want to know and make it clear for your team and your customer, hey, this is when we're all going to agree to the plan. We're all going to do this together. We're going to check that box together and mark this task completed. That's a milestone, right? Also, if we've got to order equipment and we've got hardware, cabling, different workstations, iPads, servers, part of our project, maybe that equipment being delivered, that's a milestone, right? That's a key point in that project. That you can't send your technicians on site to install the thing until the thing is there, right? So starting to think about in that base template, what's your opening, your beginning tasks, what's going to happen in the middle, that chunk of work, and then what's at the end, and then what are those milestones along the way. We have seen some things out there in writing and talked to some people, and everybody's going to have a different opinion on this, but really that middle portion, right? That execution where that work is going to happen, that's going to be the majority. So we see that usually at least 60%, if not 70 to 80% of the overall work on that project. And then within just your base template, right? So this is our framework for all projects, and we're going to get to talking about that middle chunk, how it changes and how you can identify those product offerings. But within your base template, and within those product offerings, we're going to want to try to work and have some basic information on all of those tasks. And before I get into that, and we'll talk more about that, an important question to think about, and we talk about this with all of our customers, as Kate said, from smaller size shops, 5, 10, 15 folks, to large international MSP shops that are over hundreds of employees. What is the right number of tasks or tickets to have in a project? Right? Do we just have one engineering ticket that all of our time goes into? If we have a 200-hour project, probably not the best idea, right? So what's that framework? What's the right number of tickets? And really that's going to be up to your organization to think about. A couple of places to start as you're thinking about that, though, are going to be, what are repetitive tasks that you want to continually report out on, right? So if it's a migration cutover, you want to see how long that's taking you time and time again. We want to separate that from the migration setup, probably. Also, you can look at your duration and your work estimate on that piece of work to say, should this be its own task, or can I group a couple of things together? Rob mentioned again on our webinar last month was, any work that is less than 30 minutes, can probably be grouped together, right? So looking at those budgeted hours, that work estimate as a point of reference for whether or not it should be one task or multiple tasks, and then duration as well too. So we also internally, we always recommend anything with a duration over 30 days. Do you need to split that work up, right? Can you accurately report and build your dependencies if you have a task that has a really long duration? So in those templates, in our base template, in our repetitive work, the basic information we really want to make sure we have on all of our tasks is going to be our duration, right? So How long do we have to get that work done? Our work estimate, the actual hours it takes to get that work done, that's our budget. That's what we've built the scope off of, whether it's a fixed fee, time and material, combination of the two, right? That's really important to track against. What's the resource type required, right? So what type of resource? Is it a level 1 engineer, level 2, level 3? And then also, what are those dependencies, right? So what is that task dependent of? What's that predecessor? What work needs to be done before you can start this? And then also, what are those successors off of that task? So what work can start once you finish this piece? So just a quick visual here, right? What are the key elements of a task? A couple of questions you can start to ask yourselves are, what is the task? What needs to be done? And as I referenced, maybe it's a 365 to 365 migration, right? It's the cutover, right? The cutover of the migration. Who should this role be assigned to? Now, in a template, you might not have a specific owner for that task. It's going to depend on your organization, your size. If you're a smaller shop, maybe you've got your one go-to person that does all of your migrations. We can assign that out in our templates, which then is going to allow us to help view and report out on that individual's capacity. But that's one in our templates that we can see blank a good amount of times, right? But then what's the resource type required for that task is what I would ask myself here if we don't have that specific person, right? So again, do we need a level 1, level 2, level 3? How long do I estimate it will take to complete? That's that work estimate, our budgeted hours. So we've got 2 hours there. And then how long can we give that individual, that resource type to get the work done? And right, we want to make sure we get that cutover migration done in one day. And maybe, of course, on a migration, that's something that we're going to do over the weekend as well, too, so we can make sure our clients are up and running during their business hours. And then over here, right, number 5, what other tasks is it dependent on? So maybe before we do that cutover, we need to make sure that we deploy MFA for all those users. And also, we definitely want to have that new tenant configured before we cut over. Now, if we talk about what we're going to call extra credit here on each of those tasks in those templates, right? If we're identifying that resource type, what's the cost? What's our average cost of that resource type across our organization? What do we bill for that resource type? That also is going to depend, right? Do you bill specific to the resource type, or do you have just an average rate you bill no matter what the resource type is? We definitely would recommend billing specific to those resource types, right? We want to make sure that we've got the appropriate margin by resource type, by task. And then also, are there any specific skills that are required to complete that task, to do that cutover and that migration? So maybe we want to make sure we have somebody that internally we identify as an advanced Office 365 resource type. That way, right, as we start to identify those skills, we associate our skills with our employees, our team. That's going to help us scalability, right? You get, as you start to grow and you have new PMs in your PMO, right? You don't want to have to sit down and say, all right, so John, he's pretty good. He can do Office 365. Jim will say that he can, but he can't actually do it, right? Barbara, yeah, she can get it done. You don't want to have to teach that to every person that comes in, right? So if we build those skills out in our templates, then we're going to have that there. It's going to help with scalability. And then once we have all that information, right, that's when we're going to be able to leverage a tool like Moovila and the technology and the automation that we have to forecast, right, your timeline for your projects. We can automate your resource selection, show you who's going to be the best individual to take on that work. And then also start to do automated financial analysis if we have those costs and bill rates in there. So as we get underway on that project and we start, maybe burning a couple too many hours on one specific task because our client told us that they only had 100 users and it turns out they have 200, right? We can quickly see, hey, my margin's starting to go off. This is a fixed fee project. I only budgeted 2 hours, right? I'm at 4. So we have that automated financial analysis when we ensure that we have all this information built out on our tasks within our templates, which then, of course, is going to carry into our projects. So, right, all of that information on what are those key elements, right? And those are going to get, again, apply to our base template, our default template, whatever we want to call it. Those are going to apply now to what we're going to talk about, our repeatable product offerings that we can offer to our clients or potentially new customers. And a lot of people that we work with, they know this, right? And just inherently, they know, they say, yeah, we ran 200 firewall implementations last year. We can knock that out like clockwork. We can do it day in and day out with our eyes closed. Now, maybe you get new individuals in the organization that don't know that information inherently. A good place to start is reviewing your historical projects. Start with maybe the last year, the last 6 months, the last 3 months. What's going to be a sizable chunk to bite off there to start to review? And you can look at it a couple different ways, right? Maybe you look at it by project billing type. Maybe you say, what are all our fixed fee projects that we did? Because in theory, our fixed fee projects should be those product service offerings that we know exactly how long it takes us and what it costs. Or maybe we look at it by type, right? Hopefully we have some sort of grouping, organization, or tag on our projects to say, show me all of my migration projects or infrastructure projects or refresh projects. But start to think about what's one subset, one group of projects you can look at. Because if you take your full portfolio over the last year and you're staring at 200 projects in the face, I know I would get overwhelmed extremely quickly, right? I'm going to look at all that and go, this is going to take me forever to go through, especially if the goal of this process is to define our templates and start to build out what's the right number of tasks and what do we want to report out on. We might not have that structure and that organization in those historical projects. So now looking at 200 projects that I need to go back and look at the scopes and look at the budgets, run through all the tickets, run through the hours, run through the notes, right? So find yourself a subset to look at to make it manageable for you. And then also, right, what's that cadence that you're going to review? Say, hey, I'm going to give myself 1 hour of administrative time a week to go back and review historical projects. But also at that point, looking at your current projects and saying, how often do I review those, right? Because if we are able to review our projects in real time as they close or a week or 2 weeks after, whatever our cadence is, now I've got a recommendation there, and it is do it at the end of every project. But if we can do that in real time, that information is going to be fresh in our head. We're going to be able to build out a much better template. We're going to be able to put together a lot better information than if we go back and look at something we did 6 months ago that went way off the rails. We're going to say, what happened on this one again? Why did we do that? Oh yeah, I guess that, was it the number of users? Right? So as it's fresh in our head, let's start to do that review on those projects. And then, like I said, one step at a time. So same concept, if we're going back and looking at historical projects, maybe we just identify current projects of one type that we're going to review at the end of every project, one step at a time, right? To see what we can offer, what we can roll out. And again, I would recommend probably if you're offering fixed fee on specific projects, look there and look at your budget compared to those, because those are the ones you want to standardize. If you're performing great, awesome. Maybe you can, this might be not everyone's favorite thing to hear, but maybe you're overperforming on those, right? It's taking you a lot less time than you think it should. So you're making a little bit higher margin or way higher margin than you think, which is great. But could that be a competitive advantage for you to say, man, we are really good at firewall implementations. Let's just standardize that price. Let's bring it to market. Let's offer it to everybody. Let's offer it to current customers. And we can churn through those and it's a repeatable process for our engineers that they're knocking out, every day. They're going to get even better. We're going to end up pushing through more revenue for that project, right? Because we're able to get in more sales on it because we've got a competitive price. And then on the flip side, we're way over budget and we burned our margin on projects, right? And we budgeted 200 hours, we worked 300 hours, and it was a fixed fee project. Let's look at those, right? Maybe the first step is start those types of projects at time and material, and then build that product offering over time. And then with this repeatable work and looking at those different subsets of project types, think about the 80-20 rule, right? What are 80% of your projects that you're doing day in and day out? And when we talk to a lot of customers, whether it's in the sales process or they've started their onboarding with Moovila, a lot of people say, well, we can't templatize our projects. Every single one's different. And when we end up starting to drill down into it, a lot of them, now there's a lot of companies that do custom work, right? But a lot of them are, yeah, every project's a little bit different because every customer's environment is a little bit different. The size of those customers and endpoints and number of sites is going to be different, but there's execution pieces in there that are happening every time. So maybe it's a firewall with a risk assessment with an Office 365 migration. So start to think about what are those chunks that you're doing day in and day out, and let's focus on the majority, the 80% there. And then the 20%, those are going to be the custom projects. We're going to continue to build those out. Custom, right? Custom scopes of work, time and material, or fixed fee with a contingency on them. But what we're talking about here, productizing those project service offerings, focus on that 80, and then define your process for, when something hits a threshold that it can become a product offering and when it can become fixed fee. So the last piece there, how does it all fit together? So when we jump into the platform, I'll show you how we are seeing this in the industry, how we're starting to coach around it is how do we piece together that base template and then those product offerings. So Kate, do you want me to go into the platform and then jump back to this?
Yes, let's go into the platform now. But we did have one question for the 20% you
Sure.
talked about. Do you still recommend a base template that they're starting from for custom?
Yep. Yeah, your opening on that custom project, your opening is still going to have the same sort of structure. You're still going to do an internal kickoff. You're still going to review that scope. You're still going to do a kickoff with the customer. We want everybody to agree to that milestone to build the plan. And then at the end of that project, we definitely want to do a review on that as well too. Hey, this was something new for us. How did it go? Did we knock it out of the park? Were we way off? Right. So yeah, the answer is yes, but it's really that framework. And then it's that 70% chunk in the middle that's going to be changed and custom and built out.
Awesome. Well, if you guys have more questions on the content, you can put them in the chat, and Lewis is going to switch over to the demo instance to show you. Just one note, we are not going to be doing like a full demo like we have done after some webinars, because I know some of you have been here before. We're actually just going to be diving specifically into the standardization and template features that he talked about today. So I'll drop a link if you're interested in a wider demo that you can use after to schedule that.
Yep. Cool. Thanks, Kate. So for those of you that have not seen it, this is Moovila. What I'm in here is a template work plan. And in our platform, we look at templates and projects really similarly, right? We want to make a template as close to a project as we can because really it's the same thing, right? There's a few minor differences, right? We're not gonna recognize time entries maybe or notes on a template because we're gonna think about those custom to a project. But all of that other information that we referenced and talked about along those template basics, those keys to a template, the key elements, right? We want to build as much of that out in our templates as we can. So here is an example of a base template, right? So I've got an opening, I've got a middle, and I have an end. So discovery and planning, that's going to be my opening, right? So discovery, if I open that up, I'm going to have 4 standard tasks that I want to conduct on the opening of every project. I want to review that scope. I want to see what was put in front of the customer and see what expectations they have from our team. Once I have a chance to review that scope, I want to review that internally with my team, right? Whether that's an engineer, a CSM, leadership. I want to say, hey, just so we're on the same page, this is what we're going to offer for the customer. We're doing an Office 365 to Office 365 migration. It's for this many users. Are we all on the same page? It's due by this point. It's going to cost this much, right? Let's make sure we're clear on that internally and we document that too, right? So everybody's on the same page. Takes out any questions, takes out any confusion so that we don't get halfway into the project. You call up pre-sales and say, hey, we got to go to the customer for a change order. We've blown our budget out of the water. And they're like, well, I don't want to call the customer. I don't want to go back and do that. You say, well, they told us it was 200 users. It's 500 users. They've got emails and people using the different applications and platforms all over the place, right? We're clear on that internally. Then we can take those clear expectations into our client kickoff and we can say the same thing. This is what we're offering you. This is the timeline we're going to get it done. And this is the objective, right? So that when you call and you say, hey, guys, the information wasn't right. You told us clearly here in our notes, we outlined it. It's in the scope. It was this many users. You have this many more. We've got it increased for you, right? So having those same tasks at the beginning of your project and also setting clear expectations there. And then maybe we have some sort of element of how we bill. We make sure we collect a deposit before we get into the planning work, or maybe a lot of what we see is this deposit actually happens as soon as that order's signed. So maybe the operations team doesn't get the project until the deposit's paid. We've seen that too. But then if I had any specific steps or a checklist in each of these tasks, I might want to build that out in my template here. Here's that resource type, right? So I've got a project manager on that scope review. I've got a solutions architect that's going to lead that internal kickoff. I've got project manager on the kickoff and deposit. That way I have that cost and that bill rate built in for that resource type. And then here, if I had any skills required, right? So if I said, hey, I need an advanced PM on this project, I could set that skill. Also, smaller organization, we've got a specific piece of work that only one person in our group can do. Now, it's a little bit of risk. Make sure we have that addressed and a plan for that. But we could set owners on these template tasks as well too. And then here we get into what's the work estimate, right? We're giving ourselves 2 hours to get that scope review done. And we want it to happen over the course of 2 days. And then here on that project deposit, right, we've got that's going to be a milestone. So all this information, same here too with priority on our tasks. We want to set all of this in our templates so that when we apply these templates to our projects, we let Moovila and the automation and the technology do a lot of that work for us, right? Make us more efficient in managing our projects. Let us PMs be able to handle instead of 20 projects at a time. We've seen increases upwards of 40, 50, 60 projects being able to manage by one PM, right? And then I've got similar items here in planning. You can see that my execution phase, I don't have much in there, right? I've got a placeholder for body of work, but we need to detail that out 40 hours, 5 days, right? That's going to change project by project. And then here in the closing of that project, the end of our report, we want to make sure we have documentation done. We've got a ticket for project management time if we need it, right? Hopefully we're putting our time on that internal kickoff or that client kickoff. Customer training, if we have that involved. Do we do a final wrap up and meeting with our customer? Is this a project that is going to then lead to potential more managed services we offer our client, right? Do we need to have a service brief with the managed service side of the organization? Make sure we mark that final billing. Hopefully we've been progress billing along the way as well too. And then here's that last ticket, do that project review and template update, right? So we can say, how do we do on this project? And also, is this something that we can start to offer as a product? So jumping out of this base template, before I do that, almost forgot. So if I jump into the critical path here in Moovila, so for those of you that aren't familiar with it, the critical path in Moovila, right, this is where we are going to monitor your projects 24/7, 365. We're going to tell you if we're forecasting late, if we're forecasting early, where we can update the start and due dates of all of our tickets or tasks in the project. We can build out all of those dependencies here in our templates and virtualize that work so we know our plan before the project even starts. We can build lead and lag in between tasks as well too. So we can see we've got in Moovila, and again, sorry, Kate, I'm trying not to go too far into the full product demonstration here, but in Moovila, one of our key technologies that's really specific to us is our RPAC score. So our RPAC score is a score, think of it as a credit score for your project on a scale from 0 to 1,000. So 0, not good, 1,000, good, right? It's a great gauge and quick reference point for PMs, engineers, leaders to see how are our projects doing. There's a number of calculations and issues and risks that we'll look at to calculate this RPAC score. But at a high level, we look at two things. We look at how well of a structured project do you have, and then how are we performing timeline-wise for this project at an overall project and at a ticket level. So with that first component here, how well of a structured project have we built? We want to set that up for success in our templates, right? I've got a score of 954, so I know when I apply this template to my projects, I'm ready to roll, right? I know that then as my score starts to deteriorate, potentially, that's because of timeliness. That's because I've got tickets that are late. I'm forecasting past the due date of the project. So we can use this RPAC score as a reference point as we build these templates as well too, to make sure, hey, am I giving myself and my team a good structure and a good starting point for my project. Jumping out of the template, I'm going to come into a new project. So I've come into this project and I've got a same base template, right? This is that base template I apply to all my projects, whether it's the 80 or the 20. I've got discovery, planning, I've got execution, I've got closing. You can see I've cleared out that body of work for the execution, and I've just got a milestone here when execution is going to be complete. So all that information that we took the time to research and build out in our templates, we bring that over here. We don't have to rethink it. We're going to let the system do that work for us. And if we look at the critical path here, we can see I've got the beginning half of my project. So I'm always starting with my scope review. We're going to work through discovery. And then we've got a planning complete milestone. So I've had that built into my template, which is now my project. And then I've got the back half, right? I've got the closing part. So I've got that execution's complete. From there, we go to customer training, service brief. We do that final customer meeting. We do that final billing. And then we let ourselves do that review before we complete the project. What I'm missing is that 70%, that middle piece. So in Moovila, we make it really easy and efficient for you to grab as many of those different chunks as you need. If you come into our 3.more menu here, got a lot of different ways for PMs to be able to build and work projects efficiently. We're going to come here to duplicate from project template. And what we're going to ask you is, hey, what phase do you want to duplicate? And what we're going to give you here is a listing of all of your templates that are in your enterprise or your portfolio. We also give you the option here to say, hey, actually, I want to go grab this phase from this project that's going on right now, and I want to pull it into this new project because I really like the way I set it up and it's going well. Now, I would argue that piece that's going well, let's think about templatizing that. Let's think about maybe that's something we can offer as a product here. But I'm just going to look at my templates and I'm going to then say, okay, what did we sell? What do we need to do? What do we need to achieve for this customer? And I'm going to say, all right, this was an Office 365 migration. We sold that. Let's grab that. But we also said we're going to do a risk assessment for them at the same time. So in Moovila, because we understand and we heard you, we heard the MSPs where you said no project is the same. We changed everything around here to give you the ability to grab and select in as many different phases and as many different product offerings that you need, right? So you could grab all of these if you want and build them into one project, or you could pick and choose what you need and what you want to pull in. But I'm going to grab those two execution phases for an Office 365 migration for a risk assessment. And then we're going to ask you, hey, where in this project do you want to drop that? Now, because I have my same base template that I use, I've got a great structure. I'm not going to put it in discovery and planning. I'm going to put this work into that execution phase in this project. And when I duplicate from that project template, we're then going to come and we're going to drop that Office 365 migration, that risk assessment, that chunk of work, that execution, implementation, installation, deployment, whatever we call it, is now sitting here in my execution phase. And what we'll do, if we come over and we look at our critical path here, is we now see we've got multiple work streams. So we still have our beginning, we have our end, but because we had dependencies built out in those product offerings and those execution phases, we have those additional flows here. I've got that risk assessment, and then I also have that Office 365 migration there. So we make it extremely easy for you to then tie everything together. So the other big piece of our automation, like I mentioned earlier, is we forecast the start and due dates of all your tasks for you 24/7, 365, right? Your customers expect that. You expect that. You need it, right? That's where APMM automation on the project monitoring and management comes in here. So as I'm building this project out, right, I'm looking at my scope of work and I'm saying, hey, this is going to start on June 3rd. And I'm going to say, hey, the due date the customer gave me is going to be by the end of June, June 28th, right? So now I can see quickly my RPAC score just dropped. Something's going on. We're forecasted past our due date there. But what we can do in Moovila is we can come into our dependency editor and I can say, okay, after planning is complete, I have that milestone, that specific point. I'm going to tie that to start with the risk assessment. Now, maybe we were on the risk assessment and the Office 365 migration at the same time. I would think we probably want to do a little bit of that risk assessment work before we start to migrate. So maybe at a certain point here, off of starting to prepare those reports. So I'll zoom in a little bit. So if we want to prepare those reports, once we prepare those reports, that's when we're going to start that Office 365 migration. So I can go ahead and quickly tie that dependency in, right? I can see now I've got a lot bigger project plan from start through execution. And then once I finish that cutover, then I'm going to say that execution is complete. I can fit everything together. And because I put in that work to build those dependencies in those templates, I now have a full project plan from my scope review all the way to my project review and template updates. I can see that the automation and Moovila and the technology is then forecasting, hey, project's going to start on 6/3. That's when that scope review is going to start. I've pieced all my dependencies together. I know the duration, how long each of those tasks are going to take. I can see that I'm not forecasted then to complete this project, review that until 7/25. So we've given the customer an expectation that we can start this in June and finish it in June. Reality is we're not going to be able to finish all that work until the end of July. So within seconds here, we tie this work plan together. We have a tool that we can go back to our customer and say, hey, this is everything that we're going to do for you at the same time. If we can't start until June, right, then we're not going to be able to finish until the end of July. Is it okay if we start this in May, right? Because if we start in May, we can finish in July. Maybe customer says, oh yeah, that's fine. I just thought we wanted to get it done in 1 month. If it's going to take that long, great. Hopefully they're flexible. Maybe if they're not, that leads to a different conversation. But we have the tool here to tie everything together. And what we can do in Moovila is once we save that new critical path and that structure, with 2 clicks, we would click yes, we want to update these tasks with proposed dates. We would save that. I'm not going to save it just because this is a demo instance here, but we would save those dates. We would update the start and due dates of all of those tickets. And then, of course, if you're leveraging our tool integrated with your PSA, we would then push all those start and due dates back to your PSA as well too. So if we come back, right, look at our power grid, we've got discovery, planning, execution. What are those product service offerings, Office 365 migration and risk assessment that are going to be that chunk of work? And then we've got our same closing. And now, you know what, actually I will go ahead and update the dates for everybody. So just 2 clicks there, update, right? We now have a full project plan. We've got start and due dates on all our tickets. I do want to call out our RPAC score here is okay. It's not great, right? We're in the yellow. It's 659. We don't have that many issues that we're calling out here, but we got this glaring issue that we're 28 days late on this project with that due date, right? So if I come in here and I say, oh yeah, I've had that conversation with that customer, I can start this in early May. As soon as I change that start date, you might notice the screen just flipped for us there. So the automation of Moovila is going to say, oh, your start date of your project changed, right? You can now start that scope review on 5/1. If we start that scope review on 5/1, we're now forecasted to finish this project on 6/23, 5 days early. Customer's happy, we're happy. We click update. We push all of those new start and due dates to all of those tasks with just 2 clicks. We've got a good score, 974. We've got this thing set, ready to go, so that we know as this project kicks off and we get to 5/2, if that score starts to drop, we know exactly where, right? We know that it's something with timeliness. We know we've built a good structure. We've got a good starting point for this project. Now, just one last piece I want to show you, and it goes back to those key elements and that extra credit of the resource assignment. So now that I have dates on all of these tasks, I have the resource type required, right? And then if I look here in that Office 365, I've got a skill as well too. So I need somebody that's advanced in Microsoft Office 365. I know that that task is going to take me 6 hours over 3 days. I promise, Kate, this is the last thing I'm going to show. And it's going to happen now 6/9 to 6/11. What Moovila will do for you now is if we click in and try to find the right resource, the right individual within our organization to take that work on, we're going to say you need an engineer. They need an advanced Office 365 skill. We need 6 hours from that individual from 6/9 to 6/11. Who's the best choice? And what we'll look at is, hey, if we give Kyle this work, who's the right resource type and the right skill, he will be at 50% capacity over that time period based on his current workload and then layering this work on top of him. So I might look down here and say, you know what, let me give this to Brad. He's got nothing on his plate yet. Let's go ahead and put that there, and we'll schedule this out so we know what we've got in the future and we can forecast out that capacity and that work.
Awesome. Well, if you want to flip back, I'm going to go through some questions. Again, if you guys have questions, you can put them in the main chat or you can put them in the question chat and I will get them out to Lewis. And first, before we go into that, just want to advertise, you're going to have a survey at the end. We're doing these monthly and we're trying to change our schedule and our subjects based on you guys. We get a lot of questions in these that sometimes spur other topics. On the screen are some topics we've come up with based on the surveys of the past couple sessions. We do not have next month's up yet. It should be in the follow-up email for this event. But if you have feedback, please do the survey. It's very short and we are going off of your ideas because we want to make this valuable to you as MSPs. With
If it was
that,
up to me, we would
huh?
talk about if it was up to me, we would talk about finance and budgeting every single time. But so we appreciate everything else because I just talk about that.
Yeah, if you want to go ahead. So one question is about the ability to move templates. So I think they're asking about like, can they upload from other systems? I'm guessing maybe their PSA or their existing project system.
Yeah, so we can import any MPP files as well too. So if you're using project, we can bring that in. But for our MSPs with their PSAs integrated, essentially what we do is we just import a project from that PSA, and then in Moovila, you from directly within a project convert it to a template. So that's the quick, clean, and easy way to do it.
That makes sense.
Mhm.
If you do that, how hard is it to customize afterwards? Like to add some of the features you were showing, like the not duration, the dependencies and things like that.
Yeah, really straightforward. So when we copy those projects over, hopefully we've got budgeted hours on them at least. I know from PSAs, not a lot of folks associate those resource types because it's not straightforward. It's not that easy. In Moovila, on some of those bulk key pieces of information here, we've got hotkeys throughout our power grid views, our work plan views. So it acts a lot like a spreadsheet. You can whip through here and do a quick copy and paste and change those resource types. So really, really easy for that information. And then for the dependencies, also really straightforward. You've got your structure there. You can start to build the dependencies in Moovila. We give you a couple different ways to do it. As you saw in that critical path there, we also have that more visual way to drag and drop and tie things together that a lot of people like.
Awesome. Um, this one was from early on, so keep me honest. I don't think I read this one in the first part. If they are just getting started making templates for the first time, so they have no templates, it
Yeah,
sounds like.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm trying to synthesize. Where should they be looking if they didn't have a PM, so one person to go to for projects, what type of places should they be looking to find what could have been the project list? I'm guessing maybe they're new to their organization.
Yeah, I would love to connect and try to help answer this more clearly, but if you don't know where to go to find your old projects, um, it depends on the PSA. So a lot of them do, once you change your project status to completed or closed, you can set those up. A lot of those PSAs will hide them from your project screens automatically. So there's some filters you can set and change to go back and look at older projects. I don't know if that
Yeah,
answers it.
no,
I
I
do.
imagine
I
probably.
also see a lot of people that have um, what's the right political way to say this? A lot of people use duplicate systems to manage their projects if they're using a PSA today.
Yeah. I hear
So
that a lot.
you can try to look in that PSA. We do see that there's a number of partners who, because project management can be difficult in a PSA, that they've just got 4 tickets, right? And they're basically just buckets to put time. So they have a spreadsheet or Asana or something that's duplicate entry on the side. A lot of the time it's spreadsheets. So I would say, hey, are there any spreadsheets that are out there? Also, another good place to look for those spreadsheets would be ask your pre-sales team. So the pre-sales team a lot of the time uses a spreadsheet to build their scope of work and their quotes. So go to that pre-sales team and say, hey, do y'all have any spreadsheets you've used to build projects quotes before? And that could be a good place to look to.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot. It's a big trend. Like a lot of organizations that didn't focus on projects are going into that format and hiring project
Yeah.
managers. So it's actually becoming a very common question of like, where
Yeah.
were the projects?
Yeah. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all the questions I see that have come in. So again, please do the survey at the end. We really appreciate it. I will drop in if you would like a full demo of the system, I'm gonna drop in our MSP demo link. And we do have an auto scheduler, so like you can pick your time right now. And I think it lets you schedule like one day out, so you don't have to wait. If you are a ConnectWise PSA user, we do have a full demo recorded on that webinar page I shared earlier. We also have Halo PSA now available. If you go to the Perfect Project for MSPs, you can see some information on that and other PSAs that are coming soon. And if you have other questions, like I said at the beginning, feel free to contact Lewis or I. We're on LinkedIn. You can email us. You can find us on Discord, like I said before. We're also on the road a lot. Come ask Lewis your hardest MSP project management questions. I've seen him get some very interesting ones at shows. I think the next one that's kind of the general wide show we'll be at will be MSP GeekCon, which will be in sunny Orlando in May. But in the meantime, feel free to reach out to us, and we will have information on our next session in the follow-up that will have the full recording of this session. So you can share that with your teammates if this would benefit others, and we'll have a way for you to sign up for next time. Jason, it is MSP GeekCon. I'll type it in the chat, and I probably should have pulled the information before I mentioned it. Tickets are pretty reasonable, actually. It's a very MSP focus. It's put on by MSP Geek, which is an MSP focused nonprofit. So there's operations track and technicians tracks and things like that. We're not doing any tracks there, but we will have a booth and we'll be there to hang out with everybody. So that is actually end of May. I think it starts the 19th. We are sponsoring that. And then we're at IT Nation Evolve with ConnectWise. We go to a lot of the ConnectWise user groups. We keep our event schedule on our website. And I also share them a lot too. So if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you can see those. But that is the next one I know that Lewis and I are going to be at. That's like a booth show where you can come up and talk to him and ask questions, see your own demo, stuff like that.
Yep. And if you get a nice tea in me, then I'll just talk about it forever. So
yeah, he's a nice tea guy. Well, thank you everybody for joining today. We appreciate it and we hope you have a great day. And again, love your feedback for future content. We're always evolving and trying to make this all about you and educating you on everything you want to know about project management. Thank you.
thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kate.